Thank you all very much for being here. I realize this is a bit of a controversial topic. I want to clarify things up front with saying I still believe Canada is very investable. I would say the majority of my capital is actually in the Canadian resource sector, so this is by no means an attack on that aspect of Canada. And what I'm presenting today is simply my own personal opinion. If you're super happy in Canada, if you think things are going great, then I'm not here to try to change your mind. I'm just here to perhaps give you a different perspective to think about, and I will note that also a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about are occurring across the board in legacy brand Western countries, places like the UK, Australia, Germany, France, etc. So this isn't a Canada story alone, but since we are in Canada, I would like to focus there. I'm going to focus on a potential solution, which is relocating to one of three different areas of the world: Southeast Asia, South America, and Eastern Europe and the Balkans. I believe these particular places offer an incredible value proposition for people who want to relocate, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Let's talk about the problems first. I do want to focus on the solutions, but here are the problems that I see. The destruction of rights and freedoms. Now, the Federal Court of Appeals has confirmed that the Emergencies Act was illegally used against peaceful protesters. Where is the outrage in Canada right now? Let me ask you a question. How many years do you think former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is going to spend in jail for illegally invoking the Emergencies Act? That's a rhetorical question, unfortunately. How much do you think Mark Carney, how much time is he going to spend in jail for being one of the main architects of illegally freezing Canadians' bank accounts for being political dissidents? What punishment is he going to face? At least he should be stepping down as Prime Minister, right? That would be at least the minimum that he should do. But no, he's at Davos giving speeches and everybody's applauding. Wow, he's all for freedom and democracy. I mean, it's completely insane. We're also seeing free speech, of course, being dismantled. Now, a lot of you may already notice, due to Bill C-11 being passed, that you're not allowed to see certain news items in your feed because the government is insisting that companies pay to put news into the Canadian online sphere, and Meta said, no, we're not going to do that. So any Meta-owned property, you can't even view news from now. That's almost like a Chinese firewall in a way. And now we're seeing two other bills, Bill C-8 and Bill C-9, making the rounds, as well as the Combating Hate Act. Now, it's always under the guise of protecting people or combating something that's very evil to get people on board. But ultimately, this is going to be a tool of censorship in the same way that is happening in the United Kingdom right now, and Germany also, where police are literally coming to people's homes due to social media posts that they made and arresting them. This is Orwellian, this is dystopian, and I believe it's coming to Canada as well. Yes, and so this one's a little bit uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable truth, but we are letting the worst of the worst criminals go free, and it is absolutely shocking. This man right here, I won't get into many details about what he did, but it involved basically kidnapping and enslaving young teen girls in his home and assaulting them repeatedly, giving them drugs. He was caught in the act. Literally, the police showed up at his house and found that he was doing this, arrested him, and then immediately released him back into the public. That's demonic. That makes no sense whatsoever. Then they had to arrest him 30 minutes later because he was already stalking another young woman in violation of his parole requirements. What is going on here? We have to ask the question, is this incompetence or is this malice? Is this something that's being intentionally done? Because this should cause the entire city of Lethbridge to be rioting right now. This should cause the entire country of Canada to be standing up and demanding an end to things like this. And the politicians should be holding emergency meetings over this and saying, my God, how have we gotten here? Surely this is wrong and we need to stop this from happening. But that is not happening, and I believe that's because it is intentional. I won't get too deep into why, but let's look at some of the financial reasons I see Canada collapsing. The cost of living has skyrocketed. Look at this great article from a Canadian media source. With the high cost of living, experts warn against dipping into savings. Like, could you think of anything more pandering? Hey, I've got trouble buying groceries. I might have to dip into my savings. Experts say you should. So what are you going to do? Take on debt? I mean, just this tone deafness from the media as well is a big part of the problem. And the cost of living continues to increase. Wages are not keeping pace with that. The cost of living crisis is probably one of the biggest issues in Canada as we sit here today. I don't know a better way to say this, but you're getting taxed into oblivion in this country, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And what you're getting in exchange for your taxes is a complete and total joke. You're funding wars overseas with your tax dollars. You're funding gender studies programs. It's going into black holes where nobody knows where it's going. There's no accountability here whatsoever, guys. Canada has contributed over $30 billion to the war in Ukraine. Zelensky recently came to Canada, and Mark Carney committed more. Okay, and then Christina Freeland, the former Deputy Prime Minister, goes over and works for Zelensky in Ukraine. Guys, this is banana republic stuff. Canada is a banana republic at this point in time. That's my opinion. The corruption is absolutely brazen. It is absolutely out in the open and in your face, and absolutely nothing is being done about it. Now, here's a big one. How do you justify sending over $30 billion to Ukraine and you don't have a single ton of gold in your gold reserves? Many of the narratives that you're hearing at this conference today, a monetary reset, the fact that gold is becoming more and more important in our financial system, the fact that central banks around the world are accumulating gold at a rapid pace, either in anticipation of an event that's coming or to remove their wealth from counterparty risk. Canada is not doing that. Again, guys, how can this be incompetence? Do you think all the people at the Central Bank of Canada are not talking about this? Do you think there's no high level? They're just like, well, we have no gold. Anyways, let's go on with our day. They're aware how disastrous this policy is, and so I think we could be witnessing a controlled demolition. I was actually going to give my whole talk about that, but I wanted to focus on the solution as well. And just some background about myself. I've lived overseas for most of my adult life. I've been an expat. I moved to China in 2026. I spent a couple years there. I then moved to South Korea for 8 years, and then I moved back to Canada, and what caused me to leave was the pandemic restrictions. 2021 October, I left this country and relocated to Eastern Europe, and I've never turned back. So just to give you some background there in terms of my own experience with getting different residence permits and living overseas. So here's the setup that you need. You need one or a combination of these factors to make this work. You need to be able to work remotely, whether that means you currently have a position where you can ask to do remote work, or you already have a remote position, and you need to own and run some sort of business, preferably not domiciled in Canada, because then you'll continue to get taxed into oblivion. Your business will anyways. Or be a part of the gig economy. You're working online, you're able to take on different projects. For myself, I'm a combination of 2 and 3 because I run a YouTube channel called Commodity Culture, and I also do gigs here and there. I work with Sprott Asset Management making documentaries, so I'm able to kind of get some gig work as well and make that work. Now, the important thing to note is that if you do want to relocate, you want to get an independent contractor, basically situation set up with your employer. So if you work remotely, you don't want an employment contract, you want that changed to independent contractor, then you're providing your services in the place that you're domiciled, not in Canada, so you will not be beholden to the Canadian government for your tax obligations. Now, where I think you should go, I think there's 3 options in the world right now that look as particularly attractive. There's the Balkans and Eastern Europe, where I decided to relocate. There's Southeast Asia in general. Here's a picture of Malaysia. Somehow that's still considered a developing economy. Uruguay and South America. South America also has many great options. And why am I pointing to these particular parts of the world right now? That is because a lot of them offer these advantages. Now, this isn't across the board. You have to do your own research, but they have much lower tax rates with Canada, sometimes ridiculously lower. They have a very affordable cost of living. What you also want to do, there's several cost of living calculator services online. They might not be 100% accurate, but they give you a pretty good idea. So you can compare the cost of living, for example, city by city or country by country, to get an idea of the difference. But where I live in Serbia, the cost of living is about 50% cheaper for all of your daily necessities, and probably about 70 or 80% cheaper when it comes to paying rent and real estate, which I'll get to in a second. Favorable residence programs. A lot of these countries are going the opposite direction of a lot of the EU and legacy brand Western countries in that they want more people to come in. So they're actually softening immigration laws. In Serbia, a year back, they changed the law to they give you a 3-year residence permit on your first permit. So you get a 3-year residence permit. After 3 years, you can apply for permanent residency. There's almost almost nowhere in the world in Europe where you're able to do that outside of Serbia and some of the other Balkan, Eastern European countries. A lot of the other places in South America and Southeast Asia also offer very favorable residence programs, from everything from entrepreneurship to starting your own business to real estate purchase. A lot of these places will give you a permanent residency if you purchase a home or an apartment. And that brings us to cheap real estate. The cost of real estate is extraordinarily cheap compared to Canada and many of these other Western countries. So if you're thinking of buying a place to get a residence permit, it's a really great option as well. Low crime rates. This is one of the really big ones for myself. The Balkans and Eastern Europe basically has no violent crime whatsoever. I know that sounds crazy because people think of the Yugoslavian wars, which happened in the 90s, one of the most brutal wars in modern history, of which many of those countries are still recovering from. So a lot of people's minds go back to that and they believe that the Balkans is somehow a dangerous place. It is so safe. You can go anywhere in any country at any hour of night alone and you will have zero issues. So that for me is very important. You don't have the experience of walking down the street and having to avoid sketchy people. There just are no sketchy people. Greater personal freedoms. Like I said, the main reason I relocated at first was because of escaping the pandemic restrictions here in Canada. Some people were happy with them, in which case, great. I couldn't live like that, so I just had to get out. And a place like Serbia, and I lived in Croatia before that, offered that personal freedom. And look, guys, if you're an expat relocating to one of these countries, you've got your residence permit, you're doing everything above board and legal, and you're paying your taxes to the government every year, which is much lower than it is here, as I mentioned, you are going to be left alone. And that's it. The government is not going to interfere in your day-to-day life whatsoever, and there's not going to be a lot of policy changes that are going to be implemented suddenly on you because they want to keep foreign talent in the country to grow their own GDP and to grow their own economies. This is one that it depends on your point of view. For me, I find it pretty important. Traditional family values. A lot of these countries, especially in Eastern Europe, are rather religious. I happen to like that. Some people don't, but it might not be for you, but for myself, I like traditional family values in a country I live in, and the support of raising children, having a family. The whole community gets behind you in that sort of situation, which is really nice as well. So to develop your exit plan, you need to do a lot of research. Get a spreadsheet going, find different countries that you think you might look attractive to you, find out what the residency permit process is, find out everything you can, and one of that means you need to consult with an immigration lawyer. You need to talk to lawyers in the country you're thinking of, or in several of them, that deal with immigration law specifically and that can help guide you. In a lot of these countries, the law is extraordinarily gray, and sometimes there's a letter of the law that's written but is absolutely not followed. So you need to be able to speak to lawyers. Also, it's funny, but lawyers in a lot of these type of countries, they're not even able to give you a straight answer sometimes, so you have to be aware of that. And that's why I recommend consulting with 2 or 3. Most of them, you can get an online consultation for like 100 euros. They'll talk to you for an hour. If you actually visit the country, which of course, once you've honed in on a country you think you'd like to go to, you need to visit before you commit, spend a couple weeks, a month in that society and in that culture and see if it's right for you. And then, to be honest, most lawyers in these countries will just meet you for free. They'll meet you for a cup of coffee while you're there. You can sit down, ask them any questions you have. Sometimes they'll try to pay for coffee. I've had that experience from a lawyer before as well. So legal services, much easier to access and much more affordable, so take advantage of that. Join expat communities online. I use Facebook groups, but whatever social media platform you use, of a place you're thinking of moving to in a particular city. Usually they all have expat communities online. These are really useful to follow. You can find out what are some of the common problems that are coming up amongst the expat community there. So I think that's very useful as well. And of course, you need an emergency fund. Even if you're fully set up, you want to have 6 months to a year worth of living expenses, just in case anything goes sideways. That's always very important to have. So it's not for everybody. There is a lot of downsides. I could have made a whole slide with downsides of this as well, but I'll just touch on 3 of the main ones. Poor infrastructure compared to here and in most Western countries. They're not fixing this quick. There's a funny meme where it shows a pothole in a road in the Balkans and a pothole in Japan, and a brother and sister took a picture near the pothole in the Balkans when they were kids, and they went back when they were adults and it was still there. And in Japan, it was covered within 24 hours. They'd already covered it over. So be aware that that's kind of the difference you're dealing with here. An absolutely paralyzed and chaotic bureaucracy and administrative state. It's easy to get these residence permits on paper, and as long as you bring all the appropriate documents, you also need a lawyer to walk you through this process. So hire a lawyer who's going to hold your hand and take you through everything, but you're going to deal with so much frustration when it comes to government bureaucracy, and administrative tasks such as opening a bank account and things like that can be very difficult to deal with. So you need to have that mental fortitude to realize when you're walking into a government office or a bank or somewhere where you need to get something done, open an account or submit a residence application, to be able to actually get it done in that visit is an absolute miracle. You have to consider that as some gift, like it's almost impossible. You're going to be asked for some extra paper that you didn't have. The person's just not going to want to deal with you. It's a big problem. It's a nightmare. You'll question your existence. I can say in former Yugoslavia, you'll question your existence dealing with these government staff. But if you persevere and you move through, you will absolutely get the residence permit. So that's not an issue. Obviously, a big lack of convenience. I will say one of my major complaints about Serbia is grocery stores just suck. It is what it is. You don't get very good selection. The meat selection's not very much. So that can be a problem for some people who especially love food and love cooking. I'm noticing it get better little by little, but that's why it's important to visit and see what works for you in these different environments. Now, one thing I want to mention as well is just think about this. If you can diversify your residence by getting a residence permit in one other country while you maintain citizenship in Canada, you automatically now have two options, two different places and two different political jurisdictions that you are now diversified over. You can now diversify your banking. You can diversify your brokerage account. You can open a brokerage account in overseas. And by the way, in some of these countries, you can get easier access to certain markets that you might not be able to through brokers over here. And that way, you're diversifying your actual physical presence within two different political jurisdictions. So if something happens in one or the other, you're able to move between them easily. And then, of course, if you want to, you can expand from there and get multiple residences and even look at potentially getting citizenship in some of these countries. For any of you who have ancestry in other countries that allow you to get a passport through that, I think it doesn't matter the country, just do it because you're automatically diversified at that point. I think that is like the golden ticket here in 2026 is to have more than one passport. If you're lucky enough to make that happen, then that's great. So as a starting point, I would recommend these two YouTube channels, Nomad Capitalist and Wandering Investor. Go through their back catalog. They have so many different videos on so many of the topics I was speaking about today, about all sorts of places that might not even be on your radar. Oman in the Middle East, very interesting country that has a good residency program as well. And there's a lot of these different places that they talk about banking in Cambodia and different types of situations that you might find yourself in these different countries and how to get through the administrative and bureaucratic processes, and just great info and advice. And of course, I hope you follow me here too at Commodity Culture. I hope this presentation was some good food for thought, and thank you so much.